Welcome, students, to Human Biology, and this is going to be an online course. So what I'd like you to do is take notes on these lectures and then turn those notes in each week for comment and feedback. So what we're going to do is get started in basically chapter 1 and 2, covering some of the basics of biology. So let's get started with the characteristics of life. Because what is life? We're studying biology. Biology is the study of life. So, what does it mean to be considered alive? Remember, living things have very specific characteristics. And the first thing we're going to look at is that they contain organic macromolecules. So here we have, remember, our food molecules like carbohydrates built from simple sugars, our proteins built from amino acids, lipids, which come in a number of forms. These would be typically triglycerides, or in our body, also phospholipids and steroid hormones. So, fats are a big part of living organisms. And of course, the information upon which to build them is coded for in our DNA, which is a representative of a nucleic acid. So, all life that we're aware of contain these four macromolecule groups. These macromolecules are organized into functional living units called cells. So we really consider the basic unit or smallest unit of life to be the cell. And here we have a bacterial cell. This would be a prokaryote. And we have some other cell types represented. Generalized animal cell or eukaryotic cell, and a specific neuron here. So we'll spend quite a bit of time learning about different cell types in this course. One of the things that we have come to understand is that life comes from life. In other words, these cells don't just arise spontaneously, but they actually come from other pre-existing cells. So part of that means that not only do individual cells grow, but they also divide, and then we can grow as an organism. So part of life is growth and reproduction. So if we look, for instance, at cell division, when you were just a fertilized embryo, you were a single cell organism, but then you grew by mitosis, cell division. So here you have at the top mitosis, which just is duplicating your cells, and they differentiated, and we got the fully mature organism, in this case, man and woman. We then have continuation of the generation by producing gametes such as egg and sperm, which can then recombine at fertilization to produce a new unique being. So that's actually an example of sexual reproduction of an organism. We also have other organisms that can reproduce asexually. In other words, they don't make gametes, but they just clone or bud off portions of themselves, such as this hydra. You see that it's actually just releasing a little growth, which can then become a whole new organism. This is considered asexual reproduction. Well, in order to do all of this, living things use a tremendous amount of energy. And that energy can come in all kinds of different forms, whether it be from the sun, or from the food that they intake, and even from heat sources, if you think about the chemical vents down in the deep sea. But since we're talking about human biology, we'll largely be talking about food being our source of energy. And then that energy is used to drive chemistry, chemical reactions throughout the body, which we call our metabolism. So all of the chemistry that you do in your body is generally broadly termed your metabolism. So not only do we use energy, part of the important thing we do with that energy is respond to the environment. So here we have a couple of little critters that look like they're kind of hot. So they're probably seeking shade, maybe even perspiring. So we can respond behaviorally. We can also respond through physiologic processes, and we'll look at that in quite some detail. Not quite sure what's responding there. So just to kind of think about more characteristics of life, for to be considered alive, not only do we have to contain macromolecules, be composed of cells that can undergo growth and reproduction, we use energy, respond to the environment, and actually, especially in the case of humans, maintain our internal environment. So this is called homeostasis. And that's actually, we try to maintain a fairly consistent internal environment, such as your body temperature, your blood sugar levels. So we'll go into homeostasis in some detail because there are many mechanisms needed, whether it is shivering or your skin sweating. We have many mechanisms that help us maintain homeostasis. So there we are, a look at body temp. If we get too hot, we have mechanisms to help cool us down, like sweating and, of course, exposing more skin surface area. If we get cold, we're going to kind of bundle up, less exposure, also maybe shivering, and that's going to help bring our body temperature back up. So in addition to maintaining homeostasis, we see that living things adapt to their environment, and as a species or as population of individuals can evolve or change over time. So we don't talk about individual animals evolving, but as groups we do. So thinking about this, would you consider a virus alive, or a rock, or a single cell embryo? Does it do these things? Well, certainly all of them contain organic molecules. Is a virus composed of cells? Actually, it really is not, and it requires an external host, such as you or I, to actually grow, reproduce. So it is not a self-sustaining unit. So we really don't consider a virus to be alive. However, that single cell embryo, even though it's not yet a fully formed human, absolutely is alive. It's a cell. It is going to undergo mitosis to reproduce. We're going to then see growth of the whole organism using lots of energy, definitely responding to the environment. And after the embryo has developed into its organism, it'll be better at maintaining homeostasis. But even in the womb, there's a lot of metabolic activity going on to bring oxygen to the developing embryo and later fetus, to remove waste products. So, very much interacting with its environment. So, let's discuss this idea of evolution a little bit. What is evolution? Well, very simply stated, it is change over time. When we talk about evolution in biology, we're talking about changes in the genetic makeup of populations. And so we have some unifying ideas in biology because if we look at animals, we see that they are, well, all living things are related at some level. We share DNA, we share a lot of metabolic processes, but I wanted to show you here this idea that, for instance, in the dog family, Here we have a bunch of different types of canines, which are actually closely related. So the gray wolf, the coyote, different types of wolves. Here's a wild dog. They're all related, and that's kind of what these lines are indicating, that if we go back in time, we can see that there was probably a common ancestor or a dog type that kind of branched off, and different groups of dogs found themselves in different environments and could adapt to those environments, so that today we see a broad range of dogs, but they are all related. And we call this descent with modification, or at least I would call this part more natural selection. And what you're seeing here is called a phylogenetic tree, and it helps us to think about how they might be related. It's really a working hypothesis, meaning some of these relationships may not be specifically, if you want to say proven, but it gives us a picture about how related these animals are. So we'll talk about evolution in some detail, but this is an introduction. And just know that evolution means change over time, specifically as it relates to the genetics. So you could see that a gray wolf is going to have some different genetics from, say, this jackal down here. They are related like distant cousins, but they do have differences that give them a different size, different coat color patterns, behaviors, but they're still related. And because we have these relationships, we've actually come up with kind of an organizational chart here. So if we go on the assumption that all living things are related, then what we've tried to do is organize that. So at the bottom here, we have the broadest organization that we call the domain level. And in the domain level, we are looking here at eukarya. This represents all eukaryotic life, which would be plants and animals, distinguishing themselves from prokaryote life, which would be your bacteria. Well, if we consider all the plants and animals, we can then narrow that down to simply the animals. So we would say the next level is the kingdom, and Animalia would represent all the animals. There's another kingdom for the plants. Within our animal kingdom, we can further narrow this down to the animals that have a backbone, or are chordates. This is the phylum Chordata. We can further narrow this down from the Chordata to the mammals. So these are warm-blooded, fur-bearing. They produce milk and live bear their young. So you would recognize the mammals. Here's some rabbits, cats, dogs, and we would actually be included in here too. We can then further narrow down the mammals into the carnivores, or the order Carnivora, cats, dogs. Now, we would not be included in this. We are actually in the order of primates. Within the carnivores, we could further narrow it down to the canines, Canidae. These are the dogs. So this is the dog family. And they are still more closely related. Even more would be the genus Canis, and we're getting down to dogs and wolves. And even more specifically, we can give them their species name, which would be lupus. So Canis lupus is what we call our binomial nomenclature. Every animal has their first and second name, the genus and species. So for instance, the wolf, Canis lupus. Human beings would be Homo sapiens. So you can remember this. I always remember kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species, KP, Kophagus. But however you remember it, this is going from the most broad relationships down to the most specific. So let's take a moment to, now that we've gotten down to specific organisms, let's take it even smaller and look at the organization from the smallest, simplest level. We're going to stop at the atom, really, or the molecular level, and bring that all the way back up to the organism. So the simplest level we're going to start with is simply the atom. So remember, we are made up of atoms put together into molecules. The primary atoms that we're going to be talking about are hydrogen, oxygen, carbon, and nitrogen. These together make up almost all of the human body. We can form water, carbon dioxide, oxygen, proteins, carbohydrates, fats, and if we add some salts, we would get the remainder of the body. So this is an example. We are largely made up of water and lots of protein molecules. Additionally, the lipids or fats and carbohydrates, those are the macromolecules we were talking about. We can combine those together to form our cells, the basic unit of life. These have, remember, cell membrane, a nucleus, that would be a membrane-bound organelle. Also things like ribosomes. So these cells that make up human beings and other animals and plants with the nucleus, those are our eukaryotic cells. This is going to be able to perform all the functions of life. But in a larger organism such as ourselves, these cells are actually organized into tissues. A tissue is a group of two or more cells that perform a similar function. So we'll learn in this course about different types of tissues: epithelial, which are our coverings, the muscular tissues, remember skeletal, cardiac, and smooth muscle, your nerves, and also connective tissues. So if we put these tissues together, we're going to find that we can build organs, such as your digestive, like your stomach here, or your heart, your lungs, your liver. So organs are doing specific work in our body. And when we put these organs together, we're actually going to form organ systems. And a lot of times you see that they do work together. For instance, the heart, along with the vessels of the cardiovascular system. We would also have the kidney with the bladder. When we put all our organs together, we're going to actually have, a complete organism. And remember, we can combine these organisms. So here we go. Here's an organism. This little looks like a prong, little herbivore there. So when we take a bunch of the same organism, so many individuals of a given species, and a species means they can interact. So you would have a bunch of humans or deer. This would be then a population. So a population is a group of individuals of the same species. So we would talk about the population of humans, the population of dogs, population of trees, any living organism. When we put together all the living species, we are talking about a community. So a community would be all the animals and all the plants, even all the bacteria, all the living things. We can then add to that the non-living or physical environment. There's the water, rocks, air, sunlight, wind. And this is going to make an ecosystem. We combine all the ecosystems on Earth and we talk about the biosphere. So the biosphere is the largest level of life that we are currently aware of. So let's think about just applying this. You should be able to come up with an example of a chemical level of organization. So just think about atoms such as carbon and oxygen being combined into a molecule like carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide could be further combined with water. And if we're a plant, we could make sugars and even carbohydrates. Or a population on campus could be the students on campus, or the trees on campus, or the wild cats that are on campus. And a community then on campus would include not only the students and the other human beings, but also all of the living plants and animals. And again, if we include the water fountains, the sunlight, the roadways and the parking lots, that's all going to be part of an ecosystem. So I'm just going to pause and do this in a second video.